So my name is Sushmita, and I'll be your host for today's community meeting. I have recently joined the Kubernetes community, and I've been a part of SIG enhancement. So I've been having a lot of fun getting to know a lot of interesting stuff. Let's get started. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone that this is a community meeting, and this will be live streamed and posted publicly on YouTube. So please be mindful that what you say is being recorded. And so we have a code of conduct, and so let's all be excellent with each other. Let's get started with, we have the release update from Taylor Dolezal.
It looks like Taylor isn't here yet, so let's give everyone a minute. We went through that intro way faster than normal. So I see people are still joining. Yeah. It's okay. And if he doesn't show in the next minute or so, then Bob and I can go, and then we could just come back to the release update. That should be fine. How's everyone been doing?
Good so far.
All right. Since he's not here, I guess Bob and I can go if you want.
Sure.
Okay. Bob, go ahead and share. We'll do a quick SIG contributor experience update and then kick back over to release team when someone shows up. This is your SIG contributor experience community meeting update for July. We haven't done this one in a while, so we've got a lot to get through. Next slide, please. There are 2 new chairs for SIG contributor experience. That's Bob Killen, Mr. Bobby Tables, and Castro Jo. That's me. I'd like to thank Elsie and Paris for their years of service to the SIG, and they've gone on to volunteer for other things. The major themes that we've been concentrating on in the past cycle have been sustainability around the projects that we support, automation, and working on our tech debt. So things like we finally were able to triage all the issues in our in the community repo, as an example. Next slide. For the next upcoming cycles, we're planning on sustaining our sustainability efforts. So these are the kind of little things that are annoyances across the projects that we've been trying to streamline and automate to make it easier for SIGs to do stuff. So things like fixing mailing list permissions, your calendars, that kind of thing. And we're going to continue to invest in automation, like removing workloads from SIGs, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Next slide. So we've got a lot of sub projects. So the first one is a community management sub project. This kind of is the catch-all bucket for a bunch of things that the SIG does for the rest of the project. So things like managing the project mailing lists and calendars and things like that, so that when a contributor comes to the project, they're kind of getting a consistent view of the places where we keep stuff. So like if I needed to join a SIG mailing list, where do I do that? How do I do that? Is the experience like useful for me, or is it really annoying? A lot of the things that are set up in the project, especially when it comes to our infrastructure, were set up a very long time ago and are vestigial. So we've been slowly moving away from that model as we've been making new SIGs to doing things like having our own mailing lists and things like that owned by G Suite accounts under the control of the project themselves. In the past and currently today, there's many of our mailing lists and calendar entries and stuff are owned by people's old Google accounts and things like that. So we've been slowly trying to move all those things over to a more managed suite, so we can remove that burden from SIG co-chairs, like when they have a new person step up to be a co-chair and someone goes an emeritus. What are the steps they have to do to make that smooth? That sort of thing. This also includes some of our work that we're doing on YouTube, where you see videos like this. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, all the SIGs strive to record their YouTube meetings, and then we put them on YouTube. We've tried to automate this over the past year using a tool called Splain. But recently there's been issues with APIs between Zoom and YouTube. And ideally what we want is for a SIG co-chair to click a button in Zoom and then have the meeting automatically published to YouTube. There are some issues there. And sometimes we just have to do these by hand. So a co-chair is like, hey, I don't have time to figure out this thing. Here's a bucket with my videos. And then we have a team that uploads this. We're also looking for people to join our stream team. Especially those of you in the West Coast time zone. So we have a lot of programs like Meet Our Contributors, our office hours, and there's SIGs that have meetings. Maybe they want to do an office hours. And we have a team of people, myself included, that have the equipment and like figured out OBS and that kind of thing to help stream all that stuff to the internet. But we are always looking for people, especially in the West Coast US where we currently have a hole. Next slide. Slack, the Kubernetes Slack now has over 100,000 users. That is incredible to me. So that is just a recent milestone that we've achieved. Zoom maintenance, the one thing we're asking of everybody is please check that Zoom is on your computer, is on the latest version. Over the past few months, there's been lots of issues, lots of updates, especially those of you on Linux. They do provide binaries, but a lot of those aren't self-updating. So please check your PCs when you're going to these Zoom meetings for Kubernetes and ensure that you're staying safe with that. Discuss.kubernetes.io is our internet forum. It's sitting at about 6,000 users right now. The only thing to really report there is we have had instances of people trying to use the forums to cheat on their certification exams. So we've been working with the CNCF to kind of clean that stuff up so that it's not getting posted, so that we can keep the integrity of that process. And if any of you are listening out there, computers have logs of stuff. So we know when you're cheating, and so will the CNCF. Just a pro tip if you're pursuing a CCAD. And we're always looking for moderators to moderate our properties, things like Zoom, YouTube, Slack, all the things that we do. That's all run by volunteers. So we're always looking for people who can join our contributor process and help us out, especially if you're in the Asia Pacific time zone. Next slide. Chair and technical lead meeting. This is a meeting that we have where the co-chairs and TLs from around the project come. They swap tips. We give them announcements. And then we send them in a little newsletter. Generally speaking, that's all transparent to most of you. Next. Upstream marketing, Matt Broberg has been taking this on. This is a new team in SIG Contributor Experience that has been handling a lot of our things, like our new Twitter account, which strongly suggest you follow. That's at Kate's Contributors. And we'll be posting things that are important to contributors on this account on a regular basis. So this is a way that we're planning on helping you find more information. Next slide, please. And contributors documentation, something we've been working on a while, is a Hugo front end to the community repo, where we have things like how do I make my first contribution, how do labels work, all that kind of stuff is all being worked on right now. And the Hugo site is almost done, and it's going to be nice and awesome. We also have Eric Arnerson and Joel Barker have dived in and started to tackle the developer's guide to Kubernetes, which we've needed help here for a long time. So if you're interested in helping them out, that's how you contact them. Next slide, please. And then DevStats, Lori Apple has taken this on. We know that there's a bunch of dashboards and there are challenges in trying to get the information that you want out of it. So we're going to be doing a review of all of those and seeing what we can do to make that better. Next slide, please. And then events, as you know, we didn't have any contributor events here with lack of real KubeCons. So we're currently looking at a virtual contributor summit at the later half of the year. And a new contributor workshop is moved under the mentoring sub-project. And we'll talk about that during the announcement. So that is still on. Next slide. And Bob is going to take it from here.
Okay. Sort of just like powering through all these because we try and get this done in 10 minutes. Be covering GitHub Management. The big thing is that the GitHub org cleanup is underway. Most of you have probably seen the email that went out regarding the new policy on offboarding members. Essentially, if there are no contributions within the past 18 months, we'll go ahead and remove people from the various owners files and then from the GitHub orgs. The other sort of big milestone is that Kubernetes Incubator should be retired, hopefully by the end of this month, early next month. This has been an ongoing project to sort of deprecate it since 2018, and we are down to our final 2 repos that are in the process of being migrated. The other big thing is like we have project-wide, I think, 210 repos, and a bunch of them have also sort of gone inactive. So we're going to be revisiting them and see, like, should they be archived or not. You can probably expect to see some pings regarding that stuff soon. Next big one is mentoring. So we have a couple different mentoring initiatives. One is we have started to ramp up and build programs not targeted towards new contributors, but by current or active contributors to try and grow the amount of reviewers and improvers in the SIGs. Paris is sort of leading this effort. If this is something you're interested in for your SIG, or you'd like to get involved, or you're looking for a mentor, ping Paris or reach out in the SIG Contributors Slack channel. The other thing is we also hold our monthly Meet Our Contributors, which is sort of the partner to our office hours, where we sort of have a bunch of contributors on. We answer questions live, and that gets a pretty decent mix of people that are both new to the project and current contributors. That even reviewers and improvers that are looking to help navigate new areas. And right now it's at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, and a second session is being scheduled in the evening just to reach more people. Last little tidbit, just sort of to bookend the other one, is the new contributor workshop has been moved under the mentoring sub-project, and as George said, we'll hear more about that under announcements. Slack Infra. We currently have some tooling that's been working out really, really well, developed by Catherine. It's mostly been we haven't done too much with it for a while, but we do have some upcoming stuff that we're going to try and get done. Namely, we want to connect GitHub or a repo or something like that to announcements, just so you can PR, you PR something in there and it goes out to multiple notification sources, like the announcements channel in Slack. And then the next big one is channel level moderation. Right now we have a team of I think 20 moderators that help moderate all 100,000 users in Slack, and we'd really like to be able to delegate moderation down to other groups that can support that sort of thing, especially for the other projects that aren't necessarily upstream Kubernetes related. And with that, we're sort of through our big sub projects. A couple of little things to be aware of. We have a KEP that is in flight regarding changing the issue triage workflow and some of the automation around there. Namely, we are removing some of the triage labels. So like duplicate, not reproducible, unresolved. Some of the other ones are getting renamed. So triage support's becoming kind support, and needs information is lifecycle needs information. And we are adding 2 of them. This is still provisional, by the way, so it's I think it might be implementable. I have to double check. But we are adding needs triage, which is essentially every thing coming into the Kubernetes repo will need that. And then when it has been triaged by a SIG, they will add the triage accepted label, and that's why you sort of know it's at least been looked at. Other big thing that I'm sure a lot of people saw is we are now working with another working group, the naming working group. This is mostly about changing some of the language that we use throughout the project, with the long-term goal of renaming the master branch to main. That one will take some time, and we'll be working with GitHub and a few other groups on that one, and there'll be plenty of notifications sent to KDev for that. Okay, through it all, last little thing, where to find us. you can ping George or myself or Christoph or Nikita as the tech leads in Slack on GitHub. We have our Slack channel, SIG Contribex, and our mailing list is there at the bottom, Kubernetes SIG Contribex. Just feel free to reach out and ping us at any time. Thanks. Hopefully that was 10 minutes.
Thanks, George and Bob. Next, we have Cluster Lifecycle. We have Fabrizio from Cluster Lifecycle presenting the updates for us.
Okay, thank you. Can I share the screen? Did you all see my screen? Thank you. So first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Fabrizio Pandini. I'm tech lead in C Cluster Lifecycle. I work in VMware. And today I'm giving you an update about Cluster Lifecycle and what we did in the recent cycle. So C Cluster Lifecycle is a big C. We have a lot of sub-projects. I'm giving in this slide a very quick summary, but below in the presentation, which is also attached to the meeting minutes, you can find more detail about some of our projects. So during this cycle, we had a round of improvements on our lifecycle management tools. And for instance, in Cluster API, we just released the V037 release. And this release has a lot of improvement, even if it is a minor one. It is a patch one, and I encourage everyone to test it and send feedback. The Minikube project was really active, and they added Docker and Podman drivers. So you can run more easily Minikube locally, and also the long-awaited feature for multi-node support is now available in Minikube. Also, co-ops did a lot of work during this cycle, and they added a new co-ops controller, which manages not labeling for now, but in future probably will manage also more aspect of a cluster lifecycle. And also the COPS maintainer did a great job in improving end-to-end coverage, and now they have an impressive metrics of operative system and CNI they are testing against too. And finally, Kubernetes. In Kubernetes, there was some work to improve resilience for the Kubernetes join process, especially for the less performance machines where we detected some problem with slow disk for etcd. But also in Kubernetes, we did some cleanups and deprecation and started some deprecation with the goal to remove less used feature in the next release. We also did some housekeeping in terms of the sub-projects, of the list of sub-projects we are in the scope of the SIG. So we basically sunset the Kube deploy project. We start moving the Kube AWS from Kubernetes Incubator to Kubernetes 6. And we also removed the ownership from our SIG to the /clusters directory in KK. This is a legacy directory, and in the next slide, I will talk about some work to basically get away from what is in this directory. And also we added a new project in Kubernetes 6, which is the cluster API provider for Packet. And last two notes, we merged a CAP for defining standard for communicating with local cluster repository. This is really useful for people using Minikube or Kind or such type of local developer environment, and relying on a local image repository. And it was really an interesting effort that joining different companies, including Tilt, which is a provider of developer tools that many people are using. And also, we started planning how to remove language considered offensive for our sub-project, and some work is already undergoing. So what are the plans for the next cycle? We want the SIG is committed to complete the work of removing offensive language, and we will synchronize with the work group, the naming work group, as soon as possible. And in terms of features, of new feature, we are the main themes we are committed to is to improve the story about add-ons. There is already an add-on project, and we want to this activity to gain a new traction and to deliver concrete results as soon as possible. We are still committed to continue to work on a common way for managing component config. Also, in this case, there is a working group which is managed with the cooperation of SIG API machinery. And the last main theme for our SIG is to continue working to replace the kubeapp script, which is under the famous /cluster directory, because basically this script is used only in Kubernetes end-to-end jobs, and this is really strange because basically we are testing Kubernetes with a script that is not used out in the wild. So we want to replace this script with cluster API end-to-end test jobs. This is a long-term work. There is a lot of work to do this, to make this happening, but we are coordinating with many other SIGs to make it happen. And also, another work that we see coming is to start to work with SIG node to manage this potential split of Docker shim from Kubernetes, and to figure out how this will affect user installation of the cluster and things like that. So last note. How you can contribute with a SIG? Of course, we have a set of Slack channel. We are trying to respond quickly and be really friendly. So reach out, please. Otherwise, you can go to search for help wanted and code first issue. We are doing our best to triage everything and to get all the issue properly labeled. And the only problem is that our issues are spread in a huge amount of repositories. So in the link, you can find out the list of repositories. And also, we are trying to increase our mentorship involvement as a SIG. And the Cluster Add-on sub-project is participated to the Google Summer of Code. So if you are interested, please reach out. And also the workgroup component standard is running some specific office hours, which are specifically oriented to provide mentorship and introduction to the project for newcomers. And if you're interested, you can reach out on the workgroup component standards channel on Slack. And last, where you can find us, of course, there are the SIG chairs, which are Timothy Sinclair, Justin Santa Barbara, and Lubomir. And then you can reach out to me, or there are the link where the homepage of the SIG or the mailing list or the channel are. And I leave to you the possibility to read the next slide, which will contain the readout for every single project.
Yeah, thanks Fabrizio for the update. I was wondering if we have anyone from the release team who wants to give us the release update, who wants to talk about the release update. Do we have anyone from the release team? Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. Go ahead.
I don't have the doc open at the moment, but if you want, you can just read off the updates. I think he put them in there. You're muted. You're still muted.
Okay, I don't know why it was. I was not able to unmute myself. Sorry about that. It's the document is not opening, reloading. I'm not able to see any updates for. Okay, yeah. Should I just? Is it just the 2 points or?
Yep.
All right. So the release 1.18.6 and 1.17.9 and 1.16.13 was released on July 15th, and the next scheduled release is on August 12th, and will likely be last for like 1.16 branch. That's about the release update. And now going back to the SIG updates, we have from cloud provider, we have Andrew Saikin to give us the update.
Hey, can you all hear me? Sorry, one sec. Audio issues. Sorry, am I coming out okay? I think I just froze.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Cool. So let me get started. Hey, I'm Andrew Saikin. I'm one of the co-chairs of the cloud provider SIG. And yeah, I'll be giving the community update. Hopefully I'll be quick. All right. So I want to start by talking about kind of where we are with the entry cloud providers. So as many people are aware, one of the ongoing and long-term goals of our SIG is to remove the internal cloud providers that are compiled into Kubernetes today. And so today these cloud providers are AWS, Azure, GCP, OpenStack, and vSphere. And so our SIG has been working on this effort for quite some time now. I believe this whole thing started around Kubernetes 1.8, so it's been over 10 releases now, and so we've made some pretty good progress over the last 10 releases, but it hasn't been enough, and we're still slowly but surely chipping away at this effort. So currently we have 3 of the 5 natively compiled entry cloud providers who have GA versions of the out-of-tree provider. And for those, oh sorry, 2 of them are GA and 1 of them is beta. But of those 3, they have like actual users running production Kubernetes clusters using the out-of-tree provider. And then we have 2 providers, AWS and GCP, still in early stages of development of their out-of-tree providers in alpha. Okay, so moving on to the out-of-tree providers. So yeah, the slide before was the providers that we're trying to remove.
Could everyone go on mute if they're not talking? Sorry about that.
All good. So yeah, so within our larger ecosystem, we have quite a lot of the external or out-of-tree cloud providers, as you can see. And we actually have significantly more external providers at this point than the the original in-tree providers in Kubernetes. And so this is the direction that we wanted to go early on, and clearly this out-of-tree external model is working. And so in this list, I've also included the out-of-tree versions of the in-tree providers that have actual users using it. And this isn't even the full list. I'm sure I missed a bunch of cloud providers. This was just kind of a quick GitHub search I did the other day. So I'm sure there's also to consider, there's probably a bunch of proprietary or closed source implementations of the cloud provider, which is all good and what we're hoping for out of this pluggable model of the Kubernetes cloud provider. Okay, so what did we do in the last few releases? First thing we did was improve the consumability of the Kubernetes cloud provider library. We heard a lot of feedback from folks implementing the cloud provider spec that it was difficult because it required vendoring the main Kubernetes repository, which is not something we really support. So CC, who is an engineer at Google, has been doing some great work to bundle all the cloud provider packages in a way where we don't have to import the main Kubernetes tree, which makes kind of like the Go modules, importing all the Go modules much cleaner and easier to vendor. And so this was mostly done in 119. There are a few PRs that slipped, but by 120, this should be we should have cut all the dependencies to the main Kubernetes repo. Next, Walter Fender, who is the other co-chair, has been making some good progress on the API server network proxy, which is also known as the connectivity service with the K. And so this will replace the SSH tunneler functionality we currently have in the cloud provider APIs, which today is only used by GKE clusters, as far as I can tell. Next, there was a CAP approved by RSIG and SIG-Node and SIG-Auth for an external registry credential provider in the kubelet. And so today, the kubelet has these native integrations with AWS, GCP, and Azure to authenticate to their cloud-based registry, container registry. And so we want to remove those native integrations and have a pluggable model like everything else, so that any other vendor can tell the kubelet how to authenticate to their container registries. Next, we heard quite a lot of feedback from various cloud providers in the ecosystem, saying that our controllers can be very aggressive when it comes to reconciling state, and a lot of those controllers, when they reconcile state, they reconcile the Kubernetes resource to a cloud resource, which involves sometimes many cloud API calls. And so we've heard feedback that sometimes it gets really aggressive, and a lot of customers end up hitting their API quota limits because of that. And so we made a few optimizations in our controllers to try to be more optimal about when to make a cloud API requests and whatnot. So made some good progress on that for 119. And then lastly, we standardized on semantic versioning for out-of-tree providers. And so the new policy we have in place is that a tagged version of an external cloud provider has to match the major and minor version of the Kubernetes release that it supports. So when we release 119, we're going to expect cloud providers to also tag a release 119.x, so that it's super clear to users that that version of the cloud provider is supporting Kubernetes 119 and so on. All right, plans for upcoming cycles. So we want to continue and get broader adoption of the out-of-tree cloud providers. So that's especially the out-of-tree providers that are going to be replacing the legacy in-tree providers. So mainly we want to get AWS, Azure, and GCP, the external cloud providers for those to GA status, so we can have really good confidence to finally remove the in-tree providers. And lastly, we have more ongoing work to make it really simple to implement your own cloud provider. Right now, there's an API, there's like an interface you have to implement, and there's some code that you might have to copy and paste from the Kubernetes repo to get it working. So we want to make the Cloud Controller Manager package and library super easy for anyone to pull down and implement. So that'll be upcoming for 120, 121. All right, how do these plans affect you? So if you manage a Kubernetes product or offering and you're still using the industry cloud providers, most likely it'll be either AWS, Azure, or GCP. Please plan for a migration. We are targeting to remove those native Kubernetes integrations in 1.21. So please, upgrade or migrate to use the other true provider. And if the other true provider is not ready for production use, then if you're a customer, please complain to whoever, the managed offering, or if you're a developer on the managed offering, please try to prioritize that work, because we really want to get those removed for as soon as possible. So things we need from you, we have a lot of cross-cutting initiatives requiring reviews from different SIGs for KEPs and PRs. So if we reach out, please help us review KEPs and PRs. And yeah, lastly, please help us promote the out of true providers. I think this is really challenging for us because we don't want Kubernetes favoring any specific vendor by having it compiled natively, but at the same time, we're aware that many users are using this the native cloud provider integrations in production, and we want to be mindful about not breaking users as they upgrade. So getting us to that finish line where we can finally remove the entry cloud providers is going to be a community-wide effort, and we all have to be on board with that and get there together. So yeah, please help us build those out of tree integrations and help us promote those and get users on those instead of the the entry ones that most people are using today. And yeah, lastly, where to find us. Myself and Walter Fender were the two co-chairs, and you can reach out over Slack or on the mailing list if you want to help contribute or if you have any follow-up questions. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Andrew, for the update. Now, next we have Rob Scott from the networks team giving us the update.
Hey, everyone. Can you see this? Great. This is the CIG Network community meeting update for July 2020. And yeah, I'm Rob Scott. I've got a lot to get through. CIG Network has been incredibly busy over the past quarter and beyond, and we've got lots going on. So this is just going to give a high-level overview of some of the bigger items we're working on. I am missing things that are still significant, but I've tried to just highlight some of the bigger things that we have achieved and are working on right now. So first off, big news is that Ingress has gone GA. In 1.19, Ingress is now a V1 API. It was a long road to get there. We made a number of updates along the way, but it is finally a V1 API. And along with that, in 1.19, we are seeing a few new features go to beta. Endpoint Slices, the API and some functionality was already beta, but the big news in 1.19 is the core functionality in kubeproxy is now beta, which means people will be using it by default. SCTP is support for a new protocol, and app protocol allows you to specify an application protocol on a service port. For alpha, we've made huge progress on DualStack implementation updates, and I'll get into a lot of these in just a bit. So first, we'll start with Ingress. As part of the V1 API, there's 3 relatively new changes that we made to get there. We added a new Ingress class resource to replace the class annotation. So you can reference a controller and a parameter CRD with that Ingress class resource. So you can say, for my external load balancer Ingress class, I want it to be managed by this controller, and I have this set of parameters associated with it. We're hoping this will help remove the need for some of the annotations that have become so common with Ingress implementations. We're also introducing a way to set a default Ingress class for a cluster, which should remove some confusion around that behavior as well. Ingresses can now reference other resources. So a new resource backend supports targeting non-service backends. And we can now use hostname wildcards. There's also new features like a path type that I haven't mentioned here, but you can read all about it and more in the related Kubernetes blog post I've linked to on this slide. As far as a Endpoint Slices, this is a brand new API that is a scalable and extensible alternative to endpoints. This came into alpha on 1.16, but as I mentioned, 1.19 is the first release that people are actually going to be using it by default. With kubeproxy, we're starting to switch reading from endpoints to endpoint slices, which is now default in 1.19. Lots of new networking features are going to rely on endpoint slices. That includes topology-aware routing, multi-cluster services, and DualStack support. And some new features related to endpoint slices for the 1.19 release. We now have a new controller, an endpoint slice mirroring controller that mirrors custom endpoints. So some use cases rely on managing your own endpoints. And so if you were creating custom endpoints, or you were using a tool like Knative that creates custom endpoints, those endpoints will be automatically mirrored to endpoint slices with this controller. And also we have kubeproxy Windows support in alpha now for endpoint slices. All right, so next up, and the last thing that I wanted to cover for things that we have accomplished are DualStack. So DualStack is already in alpha, but we identified some significant changes that we needed to make. And I wanted to highlight a couple of them here. There's a large cap around this, and if you're interested in DualStack, I highly recommend taking a look. There is a new IP family policy field, which allows you to specify single stack, whether you prefer dual stack or require dual stack for a service, and also an IP families field, which allows you to specify the IP families that should be provided for a given service. And every dual stack service will have 2 cluster IPs corresponding to that IP families field. So if IPv4 is first in that order, you'll see your IPv4 address first as well. And I can't emphasize this enough. This is an absolutely massive project. It spans large portions of the code base. It's requiring changes everywhere, it feels like. So this will likely span to other SIGs, and we'll need some help reviewing the PR. And on that note, there is already a huge implementation PR that's ready for review as of, I think, yesterday. So we're hoping to get this really early in the 1.20 release cycle. But that's just the big things that have been happening, but there's also a lot that we're excited about coming up. So Service APIs is a group that's working on a more advanced alternative to the Ingress API. Network Policy++ is a working group exploring ways to improve the Network Policy API. We're doing a lot of work towards topology-aware routing, and I have to at least mention multi-cluster services. CIG Network does not actually own multi-cluster services, but we're very involved in the implementation. I'll leave the actual description and talking about multi-cluster services for CIG multi-cluster, but I just want to mention that a lot of our work is relating to multi-cluster services as well. All right, so let's talk about service APIs. This is a new set of APIs that provides a more advanced alternative to Ingress. So Ingress is great as a very simple way to configure Ingress for your cluster, but it's missing some advanced functionality that a lot of people wanted. So things like, say, traffic splitting or traffic mirroring, or advanced load balancer configuration that have traditionally been rather difficult to achieve are things we're trying to make very straightforward with service APIs. This API has 3 core resources: gateway class, which is roughly equivalent to Ingress class and the Ingress API, and then gateway and route are kind of a more advanced concept of Ingress, where we split things out and added a lot more configuration. So we're working on an alpha API design as a SIG Network sub-project. We've had lots of great participation, especially from maintainers, Ingress controller maintainers, and other people who are in the community. We would really appreciate more participation, especially from end users. When we've had feedback from end users, it's been really helpful. We could use more. So if you're using the Ingress API or interested in networking Kubernetes, we would really love your feedback. We have meetings every week on Thursdays, and the meeting today is later this afternoon. Hoping to release an initial alpha API in August, and hopefully alpha implementations will follow shortly after that. So Network Policy ++ is another working group in SIG Network. And that, as the name suggests, is trying to explore ways we can improve the Network Policy API. The first step was collecting a whole bunch of user stories. I think there's a little over 20 now for network policy implementation and potential updates. And most of those have been related to node policy, reachability graphing, service level policy, external policy, or even proxy or mesh related policies. There's weekly meetings every Monday where they discuss these issues. And there's also a couple docs that I've linked in these slides. So if you're interested at all in network policy, there's some really interesting work going on to improve that. And finally, the last thing I wanted to cover was topology-aware routing. So this is another feature that is already in alpha, but it requires manual configuration. The initial approach was really not default anything. You had to specify every bit of topology-aware routing you wanted. And as we looked at it more, we thought, well, what most people want is going to be identical. Most people would prefer that traffic stays as local as possible. Just try to keep things as efficient as it makes sense. So instead of going further down that path, we may revisit it. We wanted to see how much we could accomplish with some kind of automatic algorithm, so users would not need to configure anything. There's a few steps here. We have a kept to standardized topology labels. We have a new bunch of work that's going into allowing kubeproxy to select just a subset of endpoint slices, and this is actually a really exciting part of this feature. So with this work, kubeproxy would only need to select endpoints that were local to it. So instead of being aware of every single IP in the cluster behind a service, for larger services, you'd only need to care about ones that were local to you. Still working on the specifics there, but this is going to be relevant for both this and multi-cluster service implementation. And of course, we need some updates to kubeproxy to work on the algorithm around topology-aware routing. And our goal is to have an updated approach designed and implemented for the 1.20 release cycle. We would love contributions. As you can tell, we have a lot going on in SIG Network. If you're just getting started, I recommend you come to SIG Network meetings. We have them every other Thursday, including next week. We do issue and PR triage to start each meeting, and that's a really great way to get involved. As an example, with issue triage, we are really just looking for people to help understand issues, ask for more information, and help understand the real bug behind it. You don't need to solve the issue. You just need to help gather more information. It's a great way to get to know the rest of the SIG Network community and to get started on some issues. You can also get involved in one of our working groups. If either service APIs or network policy are interesting to you, I highly encourage you to come to one of our meetings and participate. And with that, here's where you can find us on Slack, on our mailing list. Our chairs are Casey Davenport, Dan Williams, and Tim Hawkins. And I think I may have gone over time. Thank you so much. And let me know if you have any questions.
Oh, thanks, Rob, for the update. So I wanted to thank all our presenters today. We got to know a lot of interesting stuff. So thank you for sharing it with us. Moving on to the announcements. We have the new contributor workshop kickoff to be announced in the mailing list today. So keep a lookout for that. And we don't have, regarding the host for the next community meeting, we don't have any volunteers signed up for it. We're always looking for new volunteers, so you can reach out to us on Slack or message George directly, and we can help you host the next community meeting. So that's about it. Is there any other announcement anyone wants to make? Okay, then I think like the next would be the shout outs. So it can be read on the agenda. And again, thank you all for your time. Hope to see you in the next community meeting. I'll take some time to write down the notes and post it. So I'll post that soon as after the call is done. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.